Hi, everyone. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U, and today we're going to be talking about why producers want contained movies. Now, if we backed up, say, 8-10 years ago, hardly anybody even talked about this. If you said, I have a contained movie, most producers would say, yeah, and it meant nothing to them, right? Because 8-10 years ago, nobody had gone through what we just went through. Things completely changed when we hit this pandemic. Going into the pandemic, there were no solutions at that point. The entire industry had shut down. Nobody could work together. It was like, wow, it was almost an impossible situation. And the big solution, the thing that gave them the ability, and I'm talking about producers, the ability to get movies made, were contained movies. Scripts that had been written in a contained way suddenly were the solution, right? And it's like they had all these COVID restrictions and those kinds of things, but for a contained movie, it was perfect. You could do that. You could shoot it. There were only 2 actors on the set, right? It's like nobody's getting COVID. All you needed was a couple of crew members to be able to take care of things. They could all stay far enough away from each other. And as long as you had great writing, your movie was going to be a success. Now, here's what that did. That did a bunch of things, and we'll probably talk about it here in just a little bit, but what it did was it opened their minds. It had them start to see this is a possible solution. It also made it easier for them to produce movies. It kept people safe, right? And from that point on, from that moment on, having a contained movie as a writer became an advantage. So I want you to just keep this in mind as we're going through this. If you've already written contained movies before, then today is about looking for solutions that can have you come up with even better contained movies. If you've never written a contained movie, then what it comes down to is this is your opportunity and this is your chance. In my opinion, at the present moment, and probably still for the next 5 years, I think every writer should have a contained movie. And it's not because we're in COVID anymore. We're not. It's because the producers are now at a point where the moment you say you have something contained, they recognize the value of it. Now, let's just take these steps and we'll jump into this. First thing to know. Here's what we're going to cover today, by the way. Why producers value contained movies. I've talked just a little bit about that, but we'll go into it more. How to brainstorm a contained project, because it's different than if you're writing a script where you can do anything. The most important rules for contained scripts. And we'll talk about the upcoming class, the Ultimate Contained Movie, that has the complete model for how to do it and will make you an absolute pro at this. We have had so many people who have come out of that class who have had scripts optioned just because they were able to build more into a contained movie than 98% of the other writers. So this kind of stuff really makes a difference. But to start out, contained scripts are valued because, and keep in mind, when you're talking to a producer, you are talking to someone whose life is built around making good business decisions, right? That's what a producer is all about. They are constantly trying to put together business. They are constantly trying to put together deals. They are pitching all the time, and they recognize almost immediately when something's a good business decision versus a bad business decision. So here's the things to know on this one. Contained scripts are highly valued because, first, they're easy to produce, right? And that's important. Anybody who's a real producer who has already been through, shepherding a project from script all the way to final edit, knows that they're going to go through all kinds of stuff when it comes time to produce. And if you've got this set up well, you know what, with a contained movie, you've got an advantage. So let's look at this. First, they're lower budget in most cases. And, there are movies like Gravity, for instance, that was made on a high budget. And they brought in 2 big stars and all of that kind of thing. But the truth is they could have made that on a lower budget. Almost all of the contained movies could be done on a very low budget, and some of them you just add some stars and it takes it to another level. There are fewer locations, and fewer locations doesn't just mean, you're just standing in different places. It means fewer moves. You don't have to pack up the crew. You don't have to pack up all the equipment. You don't have to bring in the trucks. You don't have to take them to the next location, unpack everything, set everything up again, and all that kind of thing. If you've only got 2 or 3 locations, you just saved yourself a whole bunch of days that would normally be completely wasted from a shooting perspective. So that's important. It might take you 10 to 15 days to shoot something that, if you had more locations, may take 20 to 30. That saves a lot of money, saves a lot of time, saves a lot of human being hours, worker hours, right? Those kinds of things. Lowers the budget, all of that. And then it's easier to cast. And the reason it's easier to cast, one of the big reasons, is because you only have a couple of characters, right? So if you're doing that, it's like, all you have to do is find 2 great actors or 3 great actors to do this. And it's also in that situation, you'll see that there's been a lot of them lately that have actual stars on them. Let's see, Buried, for instance, had Ryan Reynolds. And Ryan Reynolds basically stayed in a coffin for that whole movie, which was interesting. You should read up about it at some point. A Quiet Place had a couple of fairly big stars, John Krasinski, right? Emily Blunt. Alien made stars, is what Alien did. But Gravity had Sandra Bullock and George Clooney in it, right? So these are pretty easy. If you're going to, if you can bring in 1 star, a lot of times that'll sell the movie from the beginning. The valuable thing to the star is that they're going to be on the screen the whole time. We're going to watch them go through this whole journey. If you cast 1, it's easier to get a 2nd star because those 2 will want to work together, right? So this whole thing, you'll see, it's a series of business decisions that are all better because you're doing a contained movie, right? So producers didn't recognize this before. I'm going to talk about this in just a second, like right now. What happened over the pandemic was they were trained to see the value of contained movies. Like if I back up again 10 years ago and somebody said I had a contained movie, well, the producer would just be thinking about it from, okay, do I want to do something low budget? Right? Now what they're doing is they're thinking, we could do something amazing, and it'd be easy to make. Right. And it's like, we've done it a bunch of times and audiences are used to them and all of that. And by the way, the picture you're looking at there came from Knives Out, which basically I would call that a contained movie that then they added some other locations to. Right. That 90% of that movie or 85% of that movie was shot in 1 physical location. And so, it's like, but it seems to be a big movie because they added about 7 or other little tiny locations that you see twice in the movie. That whole movie could have been shot in just 1 location and it would have been fine. So it's like, these are things that they started considering, they started seeing the value of, and it changed things for them. And of course, part of the reason why was it was the main solution during the pandemic. But the other thing was they stopped associating big with success, because we started to see contained movies that were actually doing as well or better than some of those big movies. So it's another one of those valuable reasons to be considering this. Now, how do you brainstorm one? I'm going to give you a couple of things here that'll make a difference for you. A lot of times the way people brainstorm is they get like a slight idea, and then they start building story into it, right? But if what you're trying to do is to be able to sell this, or you're trying to get a producer to option it or something like that, which is, I think you should do, right? I think that's why I'm saying I think every writer should have a contained movie, a contained script as one of the scripts that they're out there pitching. So if you're going to do that, then consider brainstorming this way. Consider taking a look and saying, what's an intriguing contained environment? And you may know of some environments that could be a great contained environment that nobody in Hollywood has ever thought of, right? I don't know where you live right now or where you came from, but you've probably been in contained environments a lot of times in your life and just didn't think of them that way. But in the midst of that, you may also have lived in towns that have specific kind of contained environments that we have never seen on a movie screen before. Or they have specific kind of contained environments that, as soon as you went into them, you started feeling haunted or scared, or, oh my God, what if somebody was put in here and imprisoned, or all of those kinds of things, right? So start keeping a running list of intriguing contained environments, because you never know when one of those could be part of your pitch. Then it's about what's the contained conflict. And remember, what we're talking about right now is brainstorming your movie idea. If you can find a unique contained conflict, and the truth is the whole news cycle is often filled with these kinds of things. The news is almost entirely based on conflict, right? Their whole purpose is to have people scared and afraid and worried and all of those kinds of things. And from time to time, you're going to run into something like this. But if you just start brainstorming, what kinds of conflicts happen in contained environments? What kinds of conflicts would be perfect for a contained environment? You'll find something. Then, what's the unique monster or villain? Who or what would you absolutely consider to be a complete nightmare to be stuck in one room with? So you start thinking about that. And in the beginning, it'll be all the ones you've already seen. And then you'll start going, okay, but what about this? And what about that, right? Who could be the worst? What could be the worst thing we've ever seen? Like the guys who came up with A Quiet Place, that one thing, they came up with one amazing idea. They came up with other ideas that were great too, but this one amazing idea. What if the monster hunted entirely based on sound? You make a sound, it kills you. Right? That was their tagline. And just that one thing, it was like that made that story. Then they built the entire rest of the story around it. Pretty cool. Come up with the right monster, you're in great shape. And then a unique layer. And most people don't think about this when you're, it's like, okay, I'm brainstorming an idea for a story or something like that. Here's what a layer basically means. It means at some point in your story, you're going to reveal that something we thought was a certain way actually isn't that way. Maybe we find out at that point that the person we thought was the good guy, let's say we have 3 people in a room, the person we thought was the good guy, it turns out, no, that's the one that's going to kill everybody. And the person we thought was the bad guy, it turns out that's the only one who can protect us, but we have disabled that person, tied them up, they're in a corner, they can't do anything, right? It's like, and put ourselves in this terrible spot. So you figure out what's a layer that could be under the surface that's not going to be revealed until the end of the first act or the midpoint or something like that, right? That layer now has the audience, when it's revealed, has the audience rethink everything that's happened, right? Go back to the thing I just made up. We've got 3 people in a room. 2 of them just tied one of them up. He's over in the corner. And now we find out that was the one who was really trying to protect us, and the other one is the killer. The moment that we find that out, first, we rethink everything that's happened up to that point. Second, now we've gone into a completely different level of the conflict. Our lead character is now in such a terrible spot, more vulnerable than ever. And this thing is going to play out, and we're about to see how does this person survive when they have really eliminated the only thing that could protect them, right? So it's like that story could have stopped right there when they tied up what they thought was the bad guy, and it could be over. But now, because we have this new layer, we have this whole other thing going on that's going to last for the rest of the movie. Now, by the way, if you're great at layers, you could have a layer uncovered at the end of the first act. You could have a layer uncovered at the midpoint. You could have another one uncovered at the end of the second act. And each one of those acts would have a completely different meaning and much more depth to it because of that. So these are great ways to be brainstorming. And when you're brainstorming, you're not just trying to put together a story, you're trying to figure out your pitch. Right? That's what this is. When you're brainstorming a movie idea, you're basically trying to figure out what's the pitch that's going to sell it when we get to the other side. Now, that's how we think on this, mainly because I spent so much time. First, we were producers at one point, but we spent so much time working with producers, and that's how they think. So you'll want to be thinking that way. Most important rules for a contained movie. First one, do more with less. Do more with less. And I know this becomes instantly obvious. You have less, like if you only have 1 or 2 locations, if you only have 2 or 3 characters, you have less. And the question is, how do you do more with that, right? Again, I saw so many contained movies. We actually did a contest at one point and looked at a bunch of contained movies. We saw so many of them that they just did an average story. They just went, okay, we're going to set it in 1 location or 2 or 3, and then we just write the way we always write. And it's like, no, you don't. You need to really truly be thinking about this. This is incredibly important. So doing more with less. You've got less locations, but they need to serve, or they need to perform double duty, right? Or triple duty or quadruple duty. That same location should be able to have 3 or 4 or 5 different, basically, story locations built into it. And, I saw one movie, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the title right now, where essentially the characters were in a single room and they made one corner about one thing, another corner about another thing, another corner about a third thing, right? Each of the corners had a different purpose for the characters. And because of that, then when you saw somebody in one corner, you automatically, it brought with it all the emotions of that corner, all the understanding, all the things that had happened in that corner, right? They really made use of what looked like a situation where there was no value to the location whatsoever. So you have to be able to do that. Then you need characters with layers. And I don't think, yeah, I'd be assuming every character needs to have some kind of layers. There needs to be something going on under the surface that they're not talking about, that we have that moment of discovery at some point, and that suddenly has us see them with so much more depth. And as I said, there needs to be more beneath the surface than on the surface. So this is something that, let's say you write one contained movie and you do it the way we're prescribing, right? You actually really go for it. If you master this right here, putting more beneath the surface than on the surface, it'll change how you write every script from now on, right? You will become twice the writer. If I was going to say, like, I've been a judge on a bunch of contests, I would say most of the ones that don't make it to the finals, it's because the vast majority of what they're writing is on the surface. Just change this one thing about your writing, putting more beneath the surface than on the surface, and suddenly you just catapulted yourself right up to the finals. Really. Because it's just like, you know, if you have, like, most screenplays, especially when somebody's written a first draft is almost always on the surface, unless you've come up with some great layers beforehand. But if you could have 3 or 4 layers to this story, and you could have subtext built into it, and you could have the audience perceiving it or wondering about it the whole time, you're a great writer, right? You're somebody who has done something that most people don't do. So this makes a huge difference in everything you write from now on. The one other thing I'd say on this, doing more with less, is building in interest techniques and finding different ways to create interest over and over and over and over again, which actually brings us to the next thing. Engages at every moment. I would say, you know, if you're doing $100 million movie, you've got a budget for being able to continually put spectacles in front of us, right? We're seeing, you know, big action scenes. We're seeing things blow up. We're seeing CGI, right? There's all that kind of stuff going on. And that keeps audiences engaged, at least to some degree, especially if they can give it meaning. But a lot of times people say, well, I'm just going, you know, I have 2 rooms and I have 3 characters. And so we're just going to get a lot into the character drama, and we're going to explore their stories and who they are and what's beneath the surface, and all of that kind of thing. And that's totally okay. But if you're going to do that, you want to just add a few extra things to it. So here, first thing, conflict on multiple levels, right? And this means, a lot of times it means there's some kind of conflict that's keeping them in that location. What is it? All right. What's keeping them in this small place? Why is it they can't leave? There's some kind of conflict between each of the characters, because if you isolate people in a room, and you guys already know this, coming out of the pandemic, you know what this is like. You isolate people, even if you isolate them in a house, there's going to be little conflicts that normally wouldn't show up because people could leave the building, right? There's also going to be conflicts that you build on levels where one character, there's something about one character that causes a problem for another. And maybe you intentionally look for, how can I put 3 people in that room that they are automatically going to create conflict on a whole bunch of different levels, right? There's something specific about them that's going to drive these other characters crazy or is going to trigger them in some way, right? So there's that. Then emotional dilemmas. And I would be looking into this. Either the whole group has a particular emotional dilemma, or maybe each character, or maybe the main characters. If you have three of them, if one of them has a true emotional dilemma, that might, cause like major emotional concerns all the way through this movie, right? Let's say you put three characters in a room and they just found out that they only have enough oxygen for two of them. And so one of them has to go, right? That's an emotional dilemma. How do they make that decision? What's going to happen? Who's going to be the one who goes? Is this going to turn into something where somebody kills somebody, or is it a volunteer situation? Is somebody going to intentionally give up their own life? Is this a vote, right? Just adding that one emotional dilemma, suddenly this story of three people trapped in this place just took a whole another, the levels of emotion, the levels of scheming, the levels of people freaking out. Somebody might volunteer and everything seems okay, and then they change their mind. Somebody might decide that they have to kill somebody in order to protect themselves or save their own lives. All kinds of things could happen just because we've created one emotional dilemma. So this stuff's really worth thinking about. C, intrigue, layers, and reveals. Now, I've already talked with you a little bit about this, but let me say a couple of things. I talked with you a lot about layers so far. Intrigue. Intrigue means there's something going on under the surface that is underhanded, and the audience has to try to figure it out, right? What intrigue does, if you introduce intrigue well, it causes your audience to continually look beneath the surface to try to solve this puzzle. And that's what you want. You want them to be constantly wondering, constantly trying to figure it out, right? That's why thrillers actually work so well, is because a lot of what they do is create a lot of intrigue beneath the surface. But by the way, you could do that in a rom-com. You really could. I just analyzed a rom-com the other day that had intrigue in it. You can build it into any genre. Let's go over to reveals. Here's what I would say about reveals. If you're in a first draft and you have a character reveal something by simply telling what happened, that's okay for a first draft. But if what you want to do is to have your audience deeply engaged and you want them to be emotionally engaged, then I'd be asking myself, how do I make this reveal shocking? How do I make it something that the moment it's revealed, it is a deep, deep emotional experience, right? How do I set it up so that the audience is looking for the reveal but doesn't know what they're looking for, right? There's all kinds of things you can build into a reveal that makes it 100 times better than somebody just telling the audience. So, and it's, again, it's okay if you have reveals that are just a character just wanted to get this off their chest. If you have reveals like that where they're going to tell us this deep thing, I'd go back and say, okay, that's a first draft or that's an early draft. Let me brainstorm. How could I make it incredibly emotional? How could I have that reveal come at the worst possible time or at the best possible time? How could I make it so difficult for that character to express it, or set it up where we as an audience are like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I had no idea. I should have known, but I didn't, right? That kind of thing. And have that reveal have an impact on the story. Don't just have it just be a piece of information, have it change things. After that reveal, we're like, oh my God, now what do we do, kind of thing, right? So, and that kind of stuff makes a huge difference, especially in a confined space. So your job on this is to capture our attention over and over and over again. Now, these have been the rules. Let me now take you to another spot. And by the way, I'd just be thinking, this is my job. I'm not just writing a story that's just going to flow along and everything's going to be okay. My job is to continually capture the attention of the audience, continually have them wondering what's going to happen, reveal something and set up the next mystery kind of thing. So, okay, key parts. These two, high concept, great title, right? If you set this up and you've got a high concept and a great title, right off the bat, you have a pitch. You have something that could give it a chance to sell. You also have something that if a producer said, so what do you have? And you say, I have a contained movie. And now you see them sit up and go, really, what is it? In the next two sentences, they're going to be thinking, I've got to buy this. You have a great title and a high concept, you're in business. So it's worth really thinking about. So a high concept, what is it? Basically, it comes down to these three things. It's unique. It's something we haven't seen. Like if we go back to Buried, the high concept of Buried could be some version of what would you do if you woke up trapped in a coffin and all you had was a cell phone and a lighter? How are you going to get yourself out? Right? Or some version of that, right? So it's unique. We hadn't seen it at that point. This is really what's going on is this guy's being held for ransom. And you could rewrite the pitch I just did and add that. But he's being held for ransom. That's kind of a unique and interesting situation. He's got to get his own ransom in that situation, right? So I would find a way to work that into one sentence and you can see the movie. And on that one, it's pretty easy to actually see that. So that makes it something that's really easy to pitch. It's something that a producer could turn to somebody and pitch it in one or two sentences, and they instantly get it. They also instantly see it as something that's very marketable. And at the same time, it's also something that could sell pretty easily in a 15-second Instagram spot or a 30-second TV spot. Your great title, this needs to point to the high concept. It basically needs to sell the movie, and it's 1 to 4 words. What you don't want is a title that, is something that nobody can understand. You don't want a title that people can't pronounce. You don't want a title that is artistic, but there's no real meaning there. Or a title that points to something that happens on page 72. So you want a title that the moment people hear it, they get it, right? Let's go back to Buried. You get it. The moment you hear it, you get it. I was interviewing the producer of Friday the 13th, Sean Cunningham. And I said to him in front of an audience, I said, Sean, let me ask you a question. And if you don't want to answer it, it's okay. But here's my question. How much of your success, and he's very successful, by the way, it's like a huge franchise, beautiful house, overlooking an interesting part of Los Angeles, all of that kind of thing. I said, how much of your success is based on that title? And he thought about it for about 30 seconds. And then he said, most of it. Now, just think about that for a moment. Friday the 13th, an amazing title. Nobody had used that before that. And so it carried a whole franchise. It automatically brought with it this thing of something bad's going to happen. It's Friday the 13th, right? It tapped into that emotional lure that people had with that. And it became something that represented this whole thing of, the kids trapped in a cabin and all of that kind of thing. So that in itself gave him a career, changed his life. So having a great title can do that. Then it's about character depth. And you really do need character depth when you're doing a contained movie. So character depth. First thing, intrigue. There's more beneath the surface than on the surface. And this is, it's easy to have a character come to you and you think about it and you kind of flesh out and you figure out some backstory and those kinds of things. But backstory isn't character depth. Backstory may tell you things about the character. The question is, when you go into this actual story, what's beneath the surface? That's depth, right? So what is this character hiding? What are they lying about? What are they not talking with us about? What have they done that they don't want anybody to know? Or what have they done that everybody's going to find out as soon as they, spring the trap? Right? That's all intrigue. Second, you want emotional issues and dilemmas. These characters, they're freaking out about something. They've got some kind of major pain, maybe some kind of major wound that they're not dealing with. And whatever environment you have, whatever situation you have, is going to cause that to be triggered. So if you put three of the most stable human beings in one location or two locations, they would probably find a way to work things out between them. They would put together a plan. They would design it to be emotionally a healthy environment, all of that kind of thing. You put together three people with major emotional issues and dilemmas, all kinds of things are going to happen. There's going to be fireworks going off on a regular basis. That's what you want, by the way. And then at some point, these characters must face their worst fear. And this doesn't have to be a horror movie, by the way. They could have to face their worst fear if you have a drama, right? Where it's like the thing that they have going on under the surface, their emotional issue that they're not talking about, this is going to bring it to the surface. And they're going to have to deal with it. Or the other character represents that in some way. And their worst fear may not be somebody stabbing them. Their worst fear may be intimacy. Their worst fear may be, having to share themselves or talk about their life or something like that. You're going to decide. Or maybe their worst fear is being trapped in a single location and they're heavily claustrophobic. I read an interview with Ryan Reynolds, and he said he had major claustrophobia while in that coffin, even though one side of it was out so we could see as an audience. He said, about the third or fourth or fifth day, it started causing all kinds of emotional stuff for him. So he was having to deal with the fear. And then these characters need to have a strong character journey. And sometimes people say to me, well, they're in this room. There is no journey. And it's like, yes, yeah, there is. You just put two characters together in the same room, and you could have a whole journey that could change both of their lives. It just depends on the writing. And here's the great news. You're the writer, so you can do this. It's just a lot of times people aren't thinking about these things. Now you are. So, and then there needs to be a conflict or other characters that trigger whoever you consider the main character. Now, if you have 3 people in a room, all 3 of them are main characters, right? So they have conflicts between them, and they are each designed to trigger the other person in some way. And you're going to decide that, what fits your concept, what fits your story. How can you in some way design it so that each of these characters really kind of are the perfect ones to do all of these things, right? To trigger them, to cause them to face their worst fear, to send them on this journey, to create dilemmas, right? And to have intrigue going on under the surface that we're only going to figure out by going through this experience. Your job is to do that. Your job is to create all of this. So now, one other thing, meaningful structure. Sometimes people say, well, we're just in one room. There is no structure. It's like, there is no structure if the person isn't a writer. But we're going to give it structure. That's our job. So this means you're going to have a strong beginning, middle, and ending. Something is going to happen during this period of time. You're also going to have strong turning points. And again, this is one of those things where when people act like it's just a story about some characters that kind of end up in a room and then finally they get out. It's like you can create turning points where let's say we're going to have a turning point at the end of the first act, and that maybe that one is they got into this room, they were there to do one thing, and suddenly they find out they can't get out. And that's the turning point. It's like, oh my God, they can't get out. They tried everything and they can't get out. Now what happens, right? So that's a turning point. Maybe there's a midpoint where we find out that one of them is a killer. That's a strong midpoint. It's like, okay, they're not only in this room, and they can't get out, but they can't get away from this killer. And if they fall asleep, it may be over for them. Right? It's a turning point. So you need to have strong turning points that send us into the next part of the story and make it worse, or make it more difficult, or make it something that's incredibly interesting for the audience. So every 30 minutes, the stakes, the conflict, and the tension rise. And so instead of it just being, this short, like I shot a short once that we did in 2 rooms, and it was like, it was an interesting character study. About 4 years later, I rethought that and went, oh my God, we should go back and reshoot that as a feature, because I came up with 3 turning points that could make it really, really strong, and ways to elevate the stakes and the conflict. And that would have been something that could have turned into a much more successful project than what we did. And then you need to deliver on the character journey powerfully. At least one of these characters has a strong character journey. At least one. So, again, if you have 3, one of them may be the protagonist, one of them may be the antagonist, the other, may be the character that we're intrigued about, that we're wondering whose side are they on, or what's going on. But whoever your protagonist is, if you're going to do it that way, they need to have a strong journey. Something has changed in their life by the end of this movie. And it was something that they never would have dealt with in any other time in their life or in any other way. And you can do that. You absolutely can do that. Now, everything that I've been talking about today, every single one of these things come down to writing decisions. And if you make the best writing decisions, you can end up with a contained movie that's incredible. So stay with me for 5 minutes here. Let me just walk you through this upcoming contained movie class. And what I want you to know just before we jump into this is I've talked with a lot of producers who have done contained movies. We've interviewed a lot of writers who have done contained movies. And we had a development team that was just obsessed with exploring this. So this is a program that is specifically designed to have you be able to write something that will surprise producers, that will make it easy for you to be able to get something made. So I think it's 12 lessons, 11 lessons. Starts with what are the key decisions? And we've talked about some of those today. So you've had a chance to kind of see what some of those decisions are. There's a few others besides that, but you're essentially going to lay out those key decisions and make at least a first draft version of those in the very beginning. Now, the reason I say first draft is because as you go through all these other lessons, you will have major insights. You will be exploring things you'd never explored before, and you'll elevate those key decisions. But number two, the second lesson is all about the high concept. So now you'll be looking at your high concept because that's one of the keys to actually selling something. And you'll discover a high concept or you'll elevate the concept you already have. Number three, who are the right characters for this story? It almost always looks like, hey, these characters randomly ended up in this room or whatever environment you're in, but there are certain things about them that make them the perfect character, that have them fit that concept, that have them play out that conflict in the biggest possible way. So you're going to be making those decisions here, and you'll be considering some things you've probably never thought of having to do with characters in a small story. Number four, and this one is huge breakthrough. Brainstorming infinite possibilities inside confinement. Let me tell you where this came from. We had a writer on our development team who said the biggest problem with a contained movie is that there are 1,000 things you can't do. And I thought about that for about a week. And the next time we got together, I went in and I said, here, there may be 1,000 things you can't do, but there are 10,000 things you can do, right? And of course, he challenged that. So what we did was we spent almost a month constantly, we took one thing, one room, one situation, and we brainstormed about 300 different things that could happen inside that one room. And that was just like us just kind of talking about it together. If it would have been my movie, I would have kept going until I found something that made it incredible. But this gives you a whole pattern, a set of structure or a set of skills for how to brainstorm and create infinite possibilities inside confinement. It could be the thing that makes your writing just so much stronger. Number five, building in more character depth. Now, we've talked about that. You've seen some of the skills for that. What you will get in here is an exact how-to on every one of those skills that we just talked about. And then layers. And I think layers is something we have a complete model for, by the way. I think this is something that most people kind of understand in a light way. As soon as you see our model and you go through this, you'll know in any story you've already written, any story you ever write, you will be able to build layers in that will fascinate audiences. Number seven is about creating the character journey. And even if, let's say you have, 5 characters who are trapped in a cave or something like that, and one of them dies in the first hour of being there, that character still has a character journey. Every character in a contained movie pretty much has a character journey. Your job is to make those character journeys meaningful and deep and valuable. And then structure for containment. I talked about it just a little bit. How do you make sure that you have, that you have strong turning points? That's one part of the structure for containment. And by the way, you'll master that here, but there's the other parts that are really important that you'll also build into your story. How to keep it low budget. We've got a whole list of different ways to lower the budget. Then at the end of this, you will write your outline for the entire story, but you'll build in all of these things we just talked about. So you will be ready to write a script. We've had a lot of people come out of this class and write their script in 10 or 15 days after coming out of the class because they had an incredible outline. And then finally, and this is the thing you don't get anyplace else, how do you discover a great title that will not only sell the script, but will make you somebody in demand in this industry? Back to Friday the 13th, Alien, Gravity, A Quiet Place, Buried, those are all great titles, right? And most people say, I'm terrible at titles. I'm talking about them. They say they're terrible at titles, but you won't be. We have a model that you've never seen before for creating titles that is designed to make it easy for you to generate really great titles. Once you have that, you can use it on every script you ever written or every script you write from now on. So this is a program that it's lasts over 1 month. During that period of time, you will put together your new contained movie. You'll write it at the end of the program. You'll have everything you need to have something that really can be a movie that people talk about. It can also be something that you can easily pitch. That's one of the things we bring to the table that makes a huge difference. Now, the normal price is $250. I'm going to give you a special, but let me tell you, the program starts on April 17th. That gives you a couple of weeks right now to brainstorm some ideas before you come in. I would just start looking at everything you can think of that is contained or could possibly be, and just go back through some of the things we talked about today and brainstorm a bunch of stuff so you're coming in with some ideas. But once you start this program, starting April 17th, from that point on, every one of these lessons will make you a better writer and give you a significantly better chance of coming up with a contained movie that has a real chance in this industry. The normal price on it is, again, $250. Here's a special. This is for the first 20 people. You guys know how our system works. For the first 20 people, you can get in at $149. That saves you $100. Now, all you got to do is just click on that link, or if it's not clickable, write it down and put it in your browser where you normally put a web address, and just click return and then sign up. Again, it's bit.ly, bit.ly/contained class. And let me say one more thing. We had this problem the last time I did this. 20 people signed up, and the 21st person, the price bumped up $40. And he was very upset with me. Please know, if the price goes up, it does. That's, I'd say if you're interested in doing this, just jump in. I promise you, this class will make a significant difference in your writing, and you will end up with a great contained story. So if this is something you want to do, just jump in. If you end up with the next level price, that means the first 20 have already signed up. It is still worth it. It's still worth it at the full price. It took us like 5 months with a development team to design this. And that was 6 people who had all written contained movies, working their ass off, trying to figure out every one of these strategies for you. So if you end up paying a higher price, it's okay. It'll make a big difference. But again, if you want to do it, I'd say just jump in and get the lower price. You'll need to do that sometime today. But now, having said all of that, listen, I want to say thank you guys for being here today. I hope what we did already made a difference for you. That's our our purpose in doing any of these calls. Yes, of course, we present classes because the classes then give you the full skill model and make sure that you know exactly what you're doing. But I always hope that we contribute to the community with these free classes. And I'm glad you joined us. So this is Hal Crosman, wishing you the absolute best in your writing. I'll see you another time. Bye-bye, everyone.